好的，朋友们，老样子来看小象方的 QA，那么这也算是每个赛季的这个照例的这个一个仪式了啊。那么没有关注小象的，赶紧去关注小象。OK， 那个原视频会放在简介里边，如果你不想听我这边逼逼叨叨的话啊，那行。
Good morning, exiles. We are live from the Grinding Geek.
这次 ZD 也去那个新西兰了。
Three of us in person today for the first time ever for a very expensive Q&A after some real whiplash from some huge announcements there. It just kept going. Like you guys just kind of got in a room together and set up the whiteboard and put everything on there, huh?
狂欢赛季。
End of the day, really, it's we have this much time, we have this many people who can do what we do, and we just keep going till the end. Like, it doesn't stop here. Like, we've still got one more week, right? Like, there are still changes that can be made, so we're going to keep making them. So,
意思是现在还没做完，还要多一周接着做。
But yeah, it's huge. It is absolutely massive.
Yeah, Jonathan was saying to me the other day, I don't think it's that big. And I was like, mate, that was crazy. It just kept going.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my perspective, I kind of look at this and I'm like, okay, when I compare it to the amount of stuff that's being created for PoE 2, it seems small, but yeah, when you actually think about it, it's like, yeah, it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, making a whole new game there, but we are only talking about Path of Exile 1 today, and you gave it plenty of space.
真的神也过来了，真的神是负责 PoE 2的。
Returning leagues,
按道理来说，但他这一次也过来，不知道看一看。
And some very experimental content as well. And with all of that, you did tease us once again with the concept and potential of a boat league, and yet you sailed away and left us stranded on the dock once more. What gives?
It's very much not intentional. I suspect, and honestly, I honestly reckon if someone actually got a boat league, they wouldn't end up actually liking it. But we can only really prove that by testing it, and so maybe one day we'll get there, but until then you're just going to there'll be boats, but you won't be on the boats. Maybe one day. We'll see.
有船，但你不能上船。
All right, we'll have to keep dangling that.
也是一种船赛季。
Out of reach for us. So, does this feel like to you guys, and I've seen this theory floated around a lot, of a bit of a send-off league for Path of Exile 1, in a sense that we've got the Path of Exile 2 beta kind of just around the corner now?
I guess I don't really see it that way because, we intend to keep on making PoE 1 leagues. We're going to, it really is just, the standard lead cycle, it is hard as a studio making two things at the same time, for sure. But, that's something we just have to sort of get used to. And yeah, we certainly wouldn't want people to think, oh yeah, this is like the last PoE 1 league or something like that, right? It's definitely not the case. We're going to be continuing to make PoE 1 leagues, and, that like you should expect to see things of this size in the future as well.
So, Settlers of Kalgur, it adds gold, and I think we should touch on that and the whole currency exchange thing first. So, it's obviously using gold for its features, its progression with the workers and upgrading buildings and things like that. But you're also experimenting with some core game features like respecs and a trading fee for the new currency exchange. Huge announcement there. So those that have been following Path of Exile 2 will be familiar with the concept of gold and why that's a thing that you might add to the game now after it's not had gold for so long. But could you explain what is the idea behind gold?
So really, I mean, gold is something that PoE 1 obviously never had. I think it's something that, in retrospect, I think that didn't help the game. The important thing with gold is that it's not used as a trading currency. Like, gold needs to be something that is only, it's bound to the individual character, and that means what it effectively is a measure of how much actual play that you've done, right, since you can't trade it between players. And that means that it actually ends up being a perfect currency to be able to do something like gate the player-to-player trade with an automated system like that, because in order to be able to you can't just sit there flipping all day. You actually have to be able to go and play the game as well, and that sort of prevents the kind of crazy inflation that you can get with other automated, auction house type systems that you see in other action RPGs. Or at least that's the theory. But the thing is that we have to test this stuff. And
对，这就是最核心的一点。这个金币跟这个交易行全都是 PoE 2拿出来的东西，然后他们在PoE 2之前需要大规模的测试这些东西的到底好不好用，到底好不好使。那哪里是最适合大规模测试的地方呢？当然是 PoE 1吧。所以这肯定就是他们也是做了很多设计，比如说你的金币是账号绑定的，你不可以交易金币，然后你的所有的交易的手续费都是要通过金币来支付的这也是一个挺强的限制。同时他们也把这个洗点的这个金币洗点也引入了游戏，就会随着你等级提高去进行这个会有更多的这个金币消耗，但是你在低等级的话应该是可以随便乱洗，这是非常乐意看到的。因为你整个剧情跑下来你花的你那个拿到的后回点可能就10多个，包括什么支线啊全部好玩，然后你途中掉的可能1-2个吧。然后如果是你是一个新玩家，你只有10多点后回点，然后你发现你的 BD 完全错误了，这个时候一般的老玩家推荐都是卡号重练，但是新玩家的准入门槛是你要我多打一遍这个剧情，那不太可能，是吧？所以这是最大的利好。换出来通货是可以交易的，金币本身不可以交易，金币本身是一个纯粹的手续费。就他为了阻止你这个，你用脚本你用各种长生术战士的方式去做，利用它这个即时拍卖行的优势。谢谢小画画，谢谢。所以这个金币是不可以被交易的，这是他们强调的这一点。然后你通过金币换到通货，这些东西都还是可以自由的线下交易，这是没有任何问题的。面对面交易，不要说线下，线下那是搞笑了，我操！线下交易直接国际服击币。
This is the reason why we're really keen to do it as a league mechanic to start with, to sort of see, like, is it going to work? Is the economy going to go weird? What's going to happen? That way we can kind of dip our toe in.
Go weird 这个应该说的是变得诡异，变得古怪。那我觉得很合理就是如果你考虑到这个，金币对即时拍卖行加金币对整一个现有的交易系统带来的冲击。我觉得就算是 GGG 那边的经济学家也不能说能够很好的估量影响，他们只能说我们来测一下吧，然后就来大规模测试赛季。操纵市场的话，那你首先得要有游戏时长，就是你首先得要刷出来那么多金币，你至少要有这些东西之后才能够去操纵市场吧。尤其当然还有一个问题就是即时拍卖行也会导致这个市面上的供给会变得非常的多。因为以前这些东西烂在玩家仓库里边的这个最大的因素就是交易成本，那我现在基本上没什么交易成本了。我打到这些东西，我立刻就可以挂上去，然后立刻就可以收到通货，我不需要再去面对面交易什么的了。所以这一块的话会加大很多供给。很多人这种仓库里边烂出来的什么十几个化石然后还有什么几个圣甲虫这种东西，也是有可能会，如果说我手头缺一点通货，我刚好就可以拿去这个即时拍卖行里面去换一下这个通货，那就是解放了这样的一个非常多的仓库里边烂掉的这个供给。国服4级产生什么化学反应？它比国服4级的那个要方便，因为它是国服4级的那个通货交易都品鉴过。你说方便吧，有点方便，但不完全方便。所以它这种方式比国服4级方便一点。然后2的话，它同时共存的话，我不知道国服会什么时候换，因为它这个东西限制你的是金币，那国服那边的话，要怎么去限制不知道。然后交易打好刷图是的，因为你交易是有时间成本的。
See what happens, test this, because the thing with this trade stuff is you really cannot test it, like in the office, right? Like it is simply we don't have thousands and thousands of people that you would need to be able to actually see how that goes. So on some level,
对，按市价上架，对，这个是很关键的一个东西，我也没看到，好像你必须要自己定汇率，它有点像是买卖股票，但是它又不给你看这最近的成交价。你还是非常可能需要开一个网页浏览器，然后调到 Ninja 之类的什么地方看也是汇率，然后按照那汇率摆上去，就很尴尬 就很尴尬。但我觉得他们应该进一步完善这样的一个东西。七伤破失吧，我还没看，我回头去看一下。
We kind of need our community to see what happens with the economy to be able to test something like that, and that's just, you know.
买家可以挂单的，应该是可以的，买家应该是可以挂单的，就是它有点就像是买卖股票、证券交易所那种形式，但你可以挂你的买单，然后只要是比你的买单低于你的这个买入价的话，它就会买入，是这个样子的。然后卖出也是一样的。只要市面上有只要你符合你那个卖家的买单，就会直接即时生效，这个样子的。是的。
One of the few areas where that's like that. Yeah, what we're hoping is that everything just goes fine. It's just way better. We can then immediately put it in, the core game as soon as we've done with that. Ideally without too many tweaks, and then that'll be good. But yeah, we really have to see by putting it in a league first.
The thing I really like about this gold idea is that it allows you to effectively be converting this idea of friction in the user experience of like physically trading into actual gameplay.
Right.
The stuff we like doing.
For sure. Yeah, I mean that really helps. And as I said, like this system, it'll be also really nice to be able to see how it works before we ship PoE 2 as well. Like it's really nice to to be able to do that. And we may be able to go further than this. The intention is to go further, and so this is effectively our first the first part. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I don't know if you're gonna know.
There is also one thing about this, and just because it maybe wasn't clear, is that despite being in the league, gold is just dropping as items from killing everything in the game. You kill monsters, you play the game, you're getting gold. You don't actually need to engage with the league to use the gambling, use the respecking, or use the currency exchange. So despite being in the league, and the gold is only dropping in the league due to us being more experimental with it and seeing how it goes, like if you don't like the league's mechanics, it's not like those are gated behind that as well. I just wanted to clarify that just in case anyone was thinking,
yeah. I don't want to. You can just invite Faustus into your hideout and then just use him for that, and and that can be the only thing you do if you want.
So all that currency exchange, the item gambling and stuff is all like fully accessible, even if you basically don't do any of the other stuff.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. Which means, of course, if it is successful, it can port into the core game very easily. You just turn gold drops on, put Faustus in. Done. I mean, there's a little bit more than that, but that's generally the summary of it. And it doesn't have to come with the whole kind of city building element and all of that comes alongside it.
Yeah. So do you see it being something that's likely to stick around then, and that's kind of the intention?
That is certainly our intention. It's just that we want to be able to still have an out if things go horribly wrong, or if we feel like we need to change some stuff. So it is certainly our intention to keep it in if we can.
It's a nice little safety net at being part of the league for you then. Safety ripcord.
Probabilities are high, and I suspect also no one's going to let us remove it, right? So let's be realistic here.
It would have to go horrifically wrong for everyone to be like, okay, you were right, don't do this.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
上一次这种情况是上一次这种大家要删掉的情况是暗黑3的那个现金拍卖函，所以我感觉 GG 应该不会踩同样的坑啊。
Thing with Faustus where you can buy these un-ID'd items and actually look pretty powerful from what I saw. Like the items it was producing were like those really well rolled rares. What's the idea behind the gold-based gambles? Why is that a part of it?
Ultimately, it's a sink. You don't want gold to just be accumulated forever. But the awesome thing is that it's a way to target specific base types. And that's ultimately the luxury. So obviously when you're going through the campaign and you're looking for specific targeted gear upgrades, very, very useful for that. And as you get higher and higher level, I guess as you upgrade your tavern, I guess technically sort of, but also as you just get higher level, it upgrades the modifier tier rating, which was a term some people might not know, but it was used in Necropolis League, which effectively cuts off the bottom X tiers that can generate. So the items by endgame will be generating with a minimum tier higher than something, and thus they are pretty powerful.
意思就是先让你去升旅馆，然后赶紧升级，先练到一个95级什么的，然后把旅馆升到满级，你就是最高的是吧？感觉是吧？
powerful items.
It's worth mentioning that like there's quite a lot of changes in this league around the idea of how can we make rares more viable than uniques. Like quite a lot of the balance things are actually around this idea, and that extends to things like adding more base types higher up and so on to make it so that there's like that they can compete with uniques more. The higher tier life mods, all of this sort of stuff, and the gambling and the ability to get rares this way as well is like once again another part of this. So we really want to try and make it so that and the reason why that's important is because if like Mark said in the video with the item quants problem as well, that was one of the other things that sort of meant that you had to be tied to specific uniques, like for sure. And so we just wanted to remove more of the barriers that allow people to just be able to use rares, and then that opens up for more different build types. Like if less uniques become mandatory. So that's as I said, it's just another one of those things that kind of affects that.
So with that being an attractive expenditure of gold, how much do you want players to be able to trade currency freely between each other with this very fast and asynchronous currency exchange system? Like, obviously, gold is your ability to control how much of that's happening in terms of volume. How liquid do you want any currency orb drop to be? So
for currency in particular, we're fine with like a very high amount of liquidity. Later on, we've talked about how in PoE 2 we're going to be doing asynchronous trade for items as well. For that, we need to have a bit less liquidity, and the reason why is because currency can sync itself, like there is its own currency sync. So effectively, that means that we don't have to like worry too much about fast trade there. Like the relative value should establish, and everything should be okay, and it shouldn't matter too much about that being highly liquid. That said, there is still a gold price to do it because we don't want people literally just sitting there just doing only that forever. But that this is something that we don't want to. It certainly should feel like if you're just playing regularly, that you can get all the currency you want from the trade market and you don't feel restricted by the gold price. Like it's not intended to be something that a normal player would run into, assuming that they're just doing normal things.
Of course, it is still meant to have high friction early game.
Because you don't want
to demean the leveling experience and the new player experience where they think the right answer is to go and just trade all of the stuff away. You want it to be that you're more finding items there and getting things organically, and only later in the game does it become...
So the gold prices late in the game are like not a roadblock at all. The gold prices early in the game are a roadblock. So that's kind of preventing that early game kind of issue.
Yeah, because you want an ALC when you're leveling your first character
you do.
To feel like an ALC.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to be like,
you don't
this should be chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. But that honestly sounds like a relief that you're not worried about that sort of thing too much, because... That kind of incentive to hoard currency and not spend it all while leveling is always a bit of a bummer.
Right.
This feels like a bit of a momentous occasion, the currency exchange. This because you've had this whole system of like the currency that syncs itself and stuff for so long, and now finally blending that with gold and this system. Huge.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's also just a mental block as well, right? Because it's like, how can you add gold to PoE? It's like, it's just one of those. It's one of those things. So
this was one of the key components that was part of like designing the league. It was largely like how we started from that point. Because again, when you ask most people in the office, most players in the office and outside the office, what is the like number one problem with Path of Exile? And in what experience gives them the most negative reaction?
For sure,
it's often trade.
Yep.
And especially, and I can't remember if it was last league or the league before. And I was trying to buy. What was I trying to buy on the currency? It was like one of the catalysts. I was like, I just need the catalyst up my rings and ammy.
Oh man.
And you get 100 people on the trade website. Yep. I just went spam. I got 100 people. And guess how many replied? Zero people replied to me. Now, I know you're meant to scroll down because all the top people are just bad actors. And then it's like, okay, I actually got to a point where I was like, okay, genuinely no one replied. And then like so as I say on Discord, I was like, yo, I need some help buying these things. Can everyone just start messaging everyone trying to get these catalysts for me, please? And so yes, it is actually one of, or was hopefully to be no longer soon, the most frustrating experience you can have as a player at endgame.
It was something else.
And yes, so when we're designing the league, we're like, okay, if this is the number one problem, how are we not taking some sort of stride to solve it? And so that's kind of where, well, it almost acted as the basis of how can we build something around that? Because then it's gold, and then it's like, what can you do with gold? And then we just extrapolated from there into all kinds of things. So Yeah, I like that a lot of what we're developing now is coming from a how can we solve actual problems first, as opposed to just, but as opposed to entirely like how can we add cool content. It's like how can we do both of these things at the same time? And I feel like a lot of what's going on in this patch is with that philosophy, as opposed to just here's cool stuff. It's solving problems and adding cool stuff at the same time.
I love this trend of you just doing the thing we do and being like, this is awful, just like you said.
Actually awful. Like, I tried to, in that live stream, I tried to voice my disgust at when I talked about price fixes and people who don't reply. But like, if you had got my actual emotional reaction, I would have probably been screaming a little bit and raging like, a little bit more.
Most infuriating thing. And it was one of the things that ground me down last league that stopped me from enjoying as much as I could. So it's huge, and it really pairs in with like the Scarab changes and stuff recently as well. So
we'll talk more about that
later. But the currency exchange includes fragments, scarabs, anything that's
exactly, that's the word. So yeah, anything like, so obviously it can't work with things like maps and so on, because they don't, they're not all identical. It's just anything that where they're exactly the same. No one item can be distinguished from another.
It has to be able to stack, is ultimately the goal, So yes, use the existing trade system for the things that can't. So that's like beasts can't be, maps can't be, incubators can't be because they have a level, things like that. They can't because they cannot guarantee to stack on a single thing. And it's not like you don't want to have a tab of incubators where it's got every incubator level 1, every incubator level 2, every incubator level 3, in this giant mega eternal list. So things like that you'll be trading using the existing way, and all stackables you'll trade hopefully using the new way.
Div cards?
Yes, div cards are in there. Yep.
Wow.
Anything that is stackable, there's
just so many of them, that's all.
Anything that's stackable and has no other variable. Yep.
Wow. And you were telling me that like it will list like the 13 most common trade pairs for each item, and
so this is the thing, because with this trade system you can technically trade any item for any other item, because that's how PoE works. So we have to have some kind of way to basically tell players, okay, so here's the actual thing that like people are trading this with. So effectively, unless you're the first person ever to trade something, then it's going to say like, here's the most popular several things that people trade for the saw, trade for the sin. It also shows you like the market price, obviously, for what's been going on, as well as okay, so we're getting into stock market terms here, but the first five price levels in the order book. So that's to say you can see like what the how many things are available at a few different price levels, and that will allow you to to do your trade. So I suppose some people will be learning more about the stock market pretty soon. I guess we'll have
I mean, some people are going to love that.
Yeah, for sure. But one thing just to make sure people understand is like this is still player to player trade. Like you.
太对了，首先去刷3小时图，刷一堆金币，然后回来再尝试玩一天，玩一天在那边做事。
You don't know who you're trading with, and like it will be instant if there's like liquidity in the market, but it is coming from someone else's actual stash.
Yeah, it's a physical trade still.
So just that's worth being, because some people, when they see the video, they're like, oh, okay, it's just like you're trading with the system somehow, or there's some kind of like market thing where the system like determines a price or something. No, it's not that. You're actually buying off someone else. So any trade you do where you've got like, I'm buying this, I'm selling this, someone else has entered a trade on the other end of I'm selling this, I'm buying that. And
the prices are all set by play as you guys setting that stuff.
Exactly.
There's a few other things I'll just mention as well that are adjacent, or got.
他这里面做事要怎么做呢？就是你要，其实也挺简单，你找一类东西，比如说找一种用的很多，不要用的很多这种圣甲虫吧，然后你挂高一点的价格但是你提供这个充足的库存，某种意义上你也是在提供流动性。因为这东西如果它需求很高的话，你虽然挂高价一点，但如果有些时候市场短暂的这个供给不足的情况下，那就轮到你的来了，对吧？缺乏流动性，那你就除非人为制造流动性的方式就是去什么论坛 然后发视频跟他去说这个东西有多牛逼，这就是人为制造流动性短缺。除了这种情况之外的话，一般就是盯着这个人多人少的时候嘛，就比如说这个国内白天时间，就是那个人都比较少的时间，这样子。然后还有这个就经典就是人多人少这个时间也是存在流动性差异的，市面上种的供给和这个需求都会变，那你就有这样的一个套利空间了。
Implemented as a result. So like when you're adding them, it will pull from your stashes. It won't. You don't have to move everything to your inventory first and then do it. So you can, because if people might be wondering, okay, if I want to sell or trade away 5,000 chaos or some number of chaos that won't fit in their inventory. As long as it is in their stash, you can do it. You can do up to 65,000 of a given currency in a single exchange, if you have that much. What else? You can. There are shortcut binds for moving all of them to your inventory, so you don't have to like.
这不是 TFT 那帮人干的事情，对啊。那你现在就有市集你也可以这么干了。那总的来说，有这么多人提供流动性的话，那市场其实会变得更好，而不是由 TFT 垄断。
Control click spam 1,000 times. It is, I believe, control right click will move all of them to your inventory. And also as a bonus, we have implemented that to and from the stash with all stackables as well. So you can control right click on a thing in your inventory to move all of that type into your stash. and vice versa.
My 35-year-old hands are falling apart. Thank you.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Best change. Very good. So if this is successful, do you see it being something you expand to being able to do other things that aren't homogenous, so maps and gear and things like that?
Well, that's certainly the plan for PoE 2, and it would be nice to be able to do that in PoE 1 as well. We just have to work out how it can work exactly. So, well, I believe that we will get there, and that's certainly our intention. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's the intention. Like this part, I think though is like solving quite a large amount of the problem, because I think this is the currency is what you're doing all the time. You need that to be easy. So like we figured that we needed to get this part out there first.
Yeah, historic for the first time ever. That's been the we want to do this unless something goes wrong. Amazing, perfect. All right, well, we'll leave the currency exchange there. Thanks for the extra insight on that. Did you have to resist temptation to like full candle graphs and all that stuff?
I'm sure at some point, this will start to happen. We'll have community websites of the technical indicators and all that sort of stuff.
就也倒不至于啊。你现在我跟你讲，你打开 PoE Ninja， 然后给那些没玩过这个游戏的人，你告诉他们这是我们游戏的炒股网站，我觉得他们都会信的好不好？你打开 PoE Ninja， 然后找到通货页什么的，然后你跟我说这是我们，你跟他说我们支持我们游戏的炒股网站，看到都会信好不好？
YouTube channel, yeah.
It is worth noting also on the currency exchange, I will be posting a video on Monday just for anyone who's unclear, or Monday or Tuesday, New Zealand, for anyone who's unclear on how it works. It's a little bit of a currency market for dummies kind of thing. It just goes over the basics and hopefully, it's room for either feedback on UX if they see anything that wants to change, or of course just better understanding of how to use it. It is very easy for someone to get very scared looking at it and go, I don't quite know what to do. But it is pretty straightforward. You just, it can be easy to fare yourself out of buying or selling stuff because you may be like, I don't know what the best ratio is, and it provides all that stuff for you. It's pretty straightforward, but still, so hence putting out a video to try and help people out, in terms of understanding when they're going into it, and we'll see how it goes.
Mate, I'm definitely signing up for your trading tips newsletter. Can't wait.
My trading tips currently is spam everyone and get really angry. So hopefully it's no longer that afterwards.
That's all of our strategy currently. Excellent. So returning to Settlers of Kalgur, how did this very cozy concept for the Settlers come about of this town building thing?
Well, I know what you pitched me on first was Pal World League. That was the first pitch I got.
I remember your initial response, I think, was, hold on, that could mean many things. Does that mean we have guns? And I was like, well,
catch
maybe.
Like Pokemon things.
You know.
Yeah, so it kind of like it moved around a little bit from the initial pitch. I know, like, 'cause, I mean, the first pitch was definitely too complicated with all sorts of, like, it had like way more stages of different products and all sorts of stuff going on. Like, it was pretty crazy, and so it kind of got put into a more sort of like PoE applicable like way. But yeah, that was the initial one at least. But I don't know if you've got a
Yeah, it was coming from, again, the philosophy of wanting to solve problems. So I wrote down all the problems, and I was like, how can we solve all these problems? And it was like, well, if you had an NPC for each, and then it's like an NPC, well, that would mean a town for each, and then you want to make some game mechanic out of it, so you have some level of automation and stuff like that. And yes, there was a very, very, very long list at the start, and we ended up just refining it down to, like, here are the actual important things that we can do and want to do. But yeah, and then obviously how the rest of it came about, the coziness and using Kalgur and all of that stuff, ultimately just comes from the fact that it's like, well, one thing that takes a long time in development, like a very, very long time, is art, right? It takes a long time. You got your concept, you got research, you got all the way through to the actual modeling and everything. It is a long process. So all of a sudden, when you can be like, well, we've got all this art from this other game here.
Handy.
Yeah. So Cal, we actually thought it would be pretty cool, basically, because in Act 4 and PoE 2, we've got this whole thing of like the Kalgur making a settlement on Rayclast. We thought it would be just cool to sort of tell that story of how that happened here, and we've got some of the stuff like we're like, it would be quite nice to do that. That's kind of ended up how that being. But the theme that we got there came after the initial concept of we want to make some kind of settlement town thing, and we're like, okay, what can we do with that? And then we realized, hey, like we've already got this sort of storyline we've got going on here in PoE 2. Might as well, connect it up and kind of have like an interesting thing there.
It definitely feels like increasing the scope of the world a little bit because
有点挖回市场那个意思。
This is a distant civilization 1,500 kilometers away. I was right.
D 就是美元，C 就是大概是这个意思，有点东西的。计算市场没法计算指数是的。强行定价，其实这个游戏还是总体来说按照那个地来定价的，总的来说还是按照地来走的。但是有些赛季地的产出特别膨胀的那种赛季，就不好说，就可能得按静止来定价，或者是按发边来定价。
The map, and those are people who have not been involved in the storyline of PoE 1. So this is a new expansion there. World-wise.
I mean, they always sort of technically existed. Like there was lore written for that when we did the previous expansion with them, Expedition. But like in PoE 2 we kind of expanded on that because we had that location and everything, and so
C 我不好说 ，C 可能是日元，因为对比起来这个汇率嘛，这个美元人民币对美元7点几嘛。那还得是日元才比较像是一个DC 比的那种感觉。
we that just meant that we've got the stuff, and I think it adds a little bit to the flavor to have to do that sort of stuff.
But yeah, it is very, very rare for us to talk about or go outside of Rayclast ever.
Yeah, there's presumably a whole world.
现在美元对日元多少啊？搜一下。哦，对吧？这它不就是 DC 比？这不就是 DC 比吗？一般赛季 DC 比不就是这个数
？It's not just like here's a planet of water with this like tiny little island, right? Like
the Star Wars planets,
So
all just one thing.
What we're saying is Boat League is possible. It's not like it's just land everywhere. Damn, that was a good. I could have used that as an excuse for no Boat League, was to have it. Aside from this little bit of water, there's just land. The rest of it,
Yeah, you've already dropped the ball on that one. There's a few boats already.
Damn it, there's lots of water.
All right.
Yeah.
So this idea of this is very much like a meta progression league, right? Like, and that's not a new concept. The idea of like a league having its own sort of progression outside of your personal character progression. But this is definitely the main flavor here. It feels. Is this something you specifically wanted to give players, like a greater context for their things that they're doing? So they're doing their Atlas, but they're getting golden resources and progressing this whole other thing.
I mean, for sure. But I will mention that, like, I guess it wasn't dwelled on a lot in the video, but like the resource resource gathering thing, like those encounters are encounters that you're going to be encountering through the world, and they have their own mechanics and stuff, which obviously Mark can talk more about. So like that is definitely like content there as well. It's just that like it's kind of not as easy to show. Like we kind of needed to show over all this sort of town stuff, but yeah, those encounters will hopefully be very enjoyable as well. And that's kind of like I suppose you could call that the meat and potatoes in some sense of the league, because that's what you'll be doing. Every area you're going to find these things and have to do those encounters. So.
Yeah, so what's that content like in Maps then?
Yeah, so you got one in every area. Well, aside from something like Tidal Island and some of that stuff, you got one in every area minimum, so it's 1 to 2. And there are 5 different outcomes, kind of 6, but we'll go over the 5. And so you can find different minerals. So the first is Crimson Iron. Crimson Iron is like iron that's overrun with like corruption. So you have these 3, 2 to 5, as it goes up as you go through the game, of these kind of growth spawners, and they're spawning demons or monsters. And then as you kill each growth, the other growths heal, like surge, spawn more monsters, and they accelerate. So they get slightly harder over time. So it's just a full monster encounter. Upon completing it, you get the ore. You've got Orichalcum, which is like guarded by these also demons, or demons were worshipping it. And you notice it had like a shrine icon. So after you kill all the demons, you get the shrine buff, which is, without immediately it sounding underwhelming, the old... you had the old like shock, where you got the Shock Nova and Firestorm shrines, except like done actual damage. So like all of a sudden you've got meteors and lightning storms raining down around you, and they are actually designed to kind of destroy monsters. So you get just this spike of power where you can kind of just run through and let them just obliterate everything. The third is Petrified Amber, which is looks like a little kind of like a tree thing, and clicking it, and all of a sudden heaps of blight-esque monsters kind of come out of the ground and try and attack it. And it's almost like the old Aurion missions from way back, where you just have to protect this tree from the blighted monsters. It's not very difficult. Like, none of these are pitched to be very, very difficult, but they are going up in difficulty in the order that I am explaining them. The fourth is Bismuth, which I suspect will be people's favorite. The way this works is it's guarded by magic and rare monsters. I think 3 packs. I think 1 is rare. Well, maybe early game not rare, but late game it's like 1 is rare, 2 are magic. And they have an extra elemental modifier on them. Like the rare and magic mods, they just got an extra one that's elemental aligned. And when you obviously kill them, there's some free 3 packs of monsters. No one's going to complain about that. You click the Bismuth, it releases the elements into the rest of the area, which will apply elemental modifiers to all magic and rare packs in the area. League monsters have a lower chance of getting them, so it's not too out of control. And that does come with the difficulty, but it also comes with the increased item quantity and rarity that
it's a bit Wildwood
the mods come with.
It?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Obviously, it doesn't spawn frequently enough, so I don't expect people to do the whole, run around the whole area killing nothing before clicking it.
Yeah, nice.
You'd be wasting all of your time. However, of course, I can imagine it is the Magic Finder's dream, even though magic finding is nerfed, but whatever, that's a different thing. It is the current, whatever is to be Magic Finder's dream.
Magic Find's buff because it's better now, because you don't have to wear crappy gear.
Well, sure. Well, yeah, sure. Whatever state it's in, or however you feel about it, it is the dream for that person, because obviously you can find I believe you can find 2 of them in an area, and all of a sudden you're doubling up on that. I will obviously double check that, but that was definitely the intention. And then, you're getting like these kind of elemental tornadoes spawn throughout the level. Obviously, they don't spawn when all the monsters are dead, so you're not just like losing and getting killed by a random tornado. And then the 5th encounter is Verisium, which is the thing that the Kalgurans love so much. And that very much is... it's like the encounter from Crucible, where it's just like... interact with this rock, and it like builds up the amount of Verisium and like spawns all the monsters around it, and then you fight them and kill them, and you get the Verisium at the end, and the monsters, you can see them kind of merging and upgrading over time. And so it's a little bit of a pick your own difficulty. Obviously, it doesn't have the whole, I talk about Crucible, it doesn't have the whole weapon tree ruckus going on and having to put an item in there and all that. It's just, here's your encounter. And then, of course, there is one boss as well, so occasionally you find a kind of hollow in the ground.
One boss.
Yep.
Okay.
It's in-game, very much in-game. Quite difficult, and he is guarding a lot of Reversium, and also again can drop a unique, and I'm pretty sure all those bosses drop a pretty substantial amount of gold as well.
So you've kind of got like 5 micro league mechanics kind of just there. Also,
等一下
drop a unique and
怪会掉很多，那个 boss 会掉很多金币啊，那是不是有一种玩法，就是我专门打 boss， 然后去救场，救场之后我就也不要什么，我直接就要金币。我地上金币我稍微捡一些，接下来我就可以回上升去玩我的了，也不用刷图，我就救场，世界有人要摇我就救场，有没有这种玩法？有没有这种玩法？
I'm pretty sure all those bosses drop a pretty substantial amount of gold as well.
So you've kind of got like 5 micro league mechanics kind of just there. Also, like on top of all that stuff. But as I said, it wasn't really covered like that extensively in the video. So I guess that was something that people, like that's your kind of like main combat stuff that you're kind of doing. That you know that's in area.
And you've got the bosses like attacking your town. And
yep,
boats
there's a couple of things like that. So yeah, there's kind of other things. So yeah, there's actually a lot going on with that. That more so than what was kind of explained.
But all that to say, there's a lot of words to say that it seems like a classic fight monster in circle.
For sure.
Fight monster in circle.
Yeah, it's 1, 2, 3, 5. So yeah, 4 encounters fight monsters in circle, and 1 is fight monsters in whole area.
Perfect.
这次一共加了多少祭坛？究极祭坛赛季。
So even if you're not that into the meta progression side of things, it's still a fight monster in circle league.
Yes, of course.
Good. It all comes back to that.
It is expected, and again, you can. There's no real harm in like just doing that for as long as you want, accumulating as much gold as you want, and then if you want to engage with the town later or something, that's always something you can do. End of the day, the gold is going to be your primary restriction, so being able to just farm for ages and get a whole bunch of gold isn't going to like, and while not necessarily engaging with the town, is not going to set you back that far.
Yes, this is very much a take it at your own leisure.
100%, yes.
That touches on the next question. And the one that when I watched it, I was like, this is the thing people might be most concerned about, is the somewhat controversial area of game design, timers, right?
Yeah,
so we worried that this would give people ick because they just have that around timers.
I can see what you mean. And like that was honestly when I was talking to Mark about like, you know, what's the thing that's going to be the controversial thing about the league, that was certainly up there. One thing that we're wanting to make sure that's really clear though is that you can stack a lot of work like on like in your town that can be done in a queue without you having to come back. So it's not like you have to come back every freaking hour to like check on anything, right? Like you can queue days of work, and like if you're doing like your map runners, for example, like you know you've got your big queue there that you can do, and then like you can just come back and then they've done all the maps, you get all the loot from all of them.
So you can just log in when you normally log in.
It also doesn't mean it's so long. Like there's these sweet spots in time that we've really aimed for, right? Anything too short, highly annoying. And then anything too long feels like a mobile game. Right? So we have this kind of sweet spots for a lot of them where it's like for example, you have your queue of maps, but I think I will note, like I'm going to say some times, but it is like highly variable, and you have the agency based on how much gold you have, the skilled workers you have. You can get these things pretty damn quick. You can, but you can also have them take a bit longer, and it's not necessarily the right or wrong answer to go either way. So if you want faster turnaround on your rewards, you do have some agency on that. It'll just cost more gold to do so. And if you want to have like a slower turnaround, like and focus your gold somewhere else, that is entirely up to you if you want to do that. So it's got a lot of agency. However, like we have been experimenting with numbers like a lot. It has been discussed constantly. And for example, with the shipping, you had the port of Calgary. That's the one that has the longest distance, or the 1,500 kilometers. That does take the longest. And I currently believe it's like, you know, towards even 10 hours. But there are ones that are going to take less than 1 hour. And now there are advantages, like a longer shipment will yield better rewards and have higher risk and different rewards. Each port has different unique rewards, and a closer one, but it's not like such a differential that you're always going to do. Well, it's hard for me to predict exactly what players will think that is the best answer, but it shouldn't be the case that you're always doing the thing that
除了股票交易之外，你这个赛季你还可以玩大航海，10小时感觉还是刚好就可以，你那个睡觉之前挂上去，然后睡醒之后呢起来忙完一堆事情，再出门或者是 干活之前云游戏开一下，然后刚好收菜，好像这个节奏是刚刚好的。然后在云游戏顺便顺手再挂上去，挂上去之后，哎，下班了又可以收菜了。
takes you feel like you have to do the thing that takes like 10 hours. So there's lots of quick things, lots of long things, and it's kind of up to you how you want to engage with that. And I think that's honestly what mostly differentiates a lot of this, aside with the fact it's also gated by gold, which requires you to actually play the game. It's not like it's just some AFK town, you know, at the end of the day you have to be playing in order to actually achieve this killing monsters, looting loot. So there's heaps of stuff there, but we have aimed for that exact sweet spot such that if you are playing, you know, it's not highly annoying and also not like I never get my rewards. Like it's going to be pretty bad if you're like, I'm level, let's say you're in Act 1 and you unlock your shipping and you send your shipping and you're like, okay, I'm not going to get that back till I'm level 80. You know? Like, yeah, that's just terrible, right? So yes, there are very quick turnarounds as well. For things like that, and then there are longer turnarounds when you're willing to spend that time to do so. And noting there are 3 ships, you could send one to a far port and then one to a close port, so you can get some ships turning around with high frequency and another turning around with a longer frequency. And the same with the mapping. It's entirely based on the difficulty of the maps, and again how skilled your runners are. So if you want to have higher turnarounds as well, you can put in either easier maps, lower tier maps, or you can put in more difficult maps. Now, I did note in the live stream, the timer on the mining was before we had done any iteration, so I'm pretty sure it had some real absurd amount of time to mine that ore. That was just a straight mistake. It does not take that long. It is much, much, much quicker.
It's also worth mentioning with the stuff is that, yeah, like as a...
换句话说，其实我可以从第一站开始玩赛季玩法，因为它都需要时间去做，然后也需要积累。我第一章开始玩赛季玩法的话，指不定还能先把什么城镇之类的怎么先升一下，比起在异界里开始玩可能会快一点点，因为有限时间的这个限制。
saying with the queues, like, okay, you can just put as many, like, when you find resources and there's that sort of mining queue, it's not like you have to, like, manually reassign your things every time. Like, they just move on to the next task.
Yeah.
So effectively what that means is that, yeah, you're not having to come back every, like, you know, and refresh them. You just play, and then the only stuff you have to come back, anything where you'd have to come back and reset them, like, for example, with the mapping, the queue is long enough that you can just, like, jam a bunch of stuff in there, and then, like, what I don't want is you to feel like you have to, like, wake up in the middle of the night and, like, freaking, you know, put more stuff in there and then come back. That's what I want to avoid. Like, it should be that you're still coming back at the normal time that you would play, like that is our design intent. And so if that's not, you know, like, we need to make sure that we're balancing it correctly so that that's the case, you know, that you don't feel pressured to, like, log in at some time you wouldn't normally do it.
Yeah, this sort of thing can be fun because it's like you get to come back to rewards and progress, and everybody loves progress and progression, right?
For sure.
We're addicts for that stuff. That's why we play this genre. But I was definitely concerned about that idea that would have to, you know, I feel like if I didn't get on in half an hour after I was planning on logging off, I wouldn't be able to reallocate my workers.
Right.
But you don't have, it just does that.
Yeah, it just doesn't.
Well, yeah, we're not making a mobile game here. I know that's the
and you can't
association.
pay to skip any of these timers.
Of course not. And I'm not going to also at one point, I know, look, these things are always going to be divisive. They're not necessarily going to be globally loved. And part of it is just you're going to have to try it to understand. Mm-hmm. The concept of a timer is scary to start with, but I'm also, on the other hand, not going to, you know, sit here about complaining about the cold currency thing and then also implement something that, you know, on the other hand, I'm going to have equal levels of frustration with myself as a player. Surprisingly, but you know,
you want to play this after all, don't you?
100. Of course, I want to play it. I'm never going to make a game I don't want to play. So yeah, my hope is, but of course that assumes we get it right. The good thing is we're very, very fast to react to this stuff. So if the timers are tilted one way or another, we have so many levers we can adjust to rebalance. It is, of course, we get our internal feedback, we get our alpha feedback on the times, but that's still a very small subset compared to everyone. So I could expect, you know, if things aren't right, if they're off, if something's taking too long or too short, or there's not enough agency, we're very, very quick to be flexible to that stuff and react to it if we have to. But yeah, it's interesting and it's new for damn sure. But I'd say I'm more definitely on the side of excited over worried. But there's always a little bit of worry there. It comes with the job, and
I like that you guys are still trying new things, you know, whether they work out or not.
100%. A large part of what we always try and do is push the boundary, right? Like, just doing the safe thing over and over and over again can make things feel quite stale. So we definitely want to take risks and see where they go and see how they evolve. And because ultimately, I believe that makes the best game possible, for sure.
Keep trying it. One more quick nuance about that is the progress on timers and things. That's all even online versus offline.
Yeah.
Okay, so whether you're you don't have to stay logged in, online to speed things up.
No.
Good stuff.
The only things that can happen that disrupt it, which is obviously if your map, if your ship gets commandeered, it can get commandeered offline or online, right? So it can stop it. It isn't something that happens ultra frequently, and you can avoid it. You can get it to the point where a commandeering will not occur, and the same with your Atlas runners being kidnapped. That can occur online or offline, but again, it is avoidable. It doesn't have to happen. If you can get good enough people and run slightly easier content, and all of a sudden there's no risk of your Atlas runners failing or anything like that.
Yeah. Speaking of risk, so how does this scale with map tiers and map effect and stuff like that? So as you move up through maps, do you get more resources, more gold? Does it scale with map quantity? So your mods?
Yep. Gold scales with everything that drops would scale with. In party, I get my gold, you get your gold. We cannot share gold. Obviously, there's no point in having it.
那更对了，那我去救场，对面也会掉金币，我也会掉金币。哇，那更对了，懂了。这下赛季玩一个这种救场 BD， 专门救场，然后去毛金币，慈善救场，什么都不要，只要金币。
If you can't trade it, then all of a sudden, items do not sell for gold, so it's not like you can trade items to bypass that. But everything, item map quantity scales gold. Yep, all the same. It's auto pickup, obviously, with obviously the new enhanced item pickup radius, and the amount of ore also should scale with quantity. Yes, obviously, much like. Sulfite, I guess, from Delve. That's probably one of the closest comparisons in terms of giving you a resource.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it seemed like mostly gold was used to upgrade the buildings and things like that in your town, and that sort of progress is mostly through that. So the resources are all for this shipping to get this risk-reward system to get currency and gear and stuff like that. And the multiple pages of currency thing, that looked a bit crazy. Is that for real? How much work is getting 3 pages of Chaos Orbs and Divines and stuff?
Well, that's that agency I'm talking about as well, where a long trip should yield a lot of loot. Now, we have made some changes since then where what we're doing is instead of... because we were scaling rewards on quite a quantitative axis, and we've moved a lot of that into more qualitative, so that instead of getting so much more currency linearly, you're getting better currency instead of more, just so it's less of that.
Cults roll up into chaos and whatnot.
Yeah, if you save up, you can just be I'm just going to play, get all the gold and acquire as many resources as I can and send a shipment that's maxed out in value, and then put the best possible ship workers on there because you don't want to lose that shipment, I'll tell you that, and send it to the farthest thing. You'll get back a ton of loot, but of course you have to. You're now getting 1 week of loot all in one go. You know what I mean?
Okay.
You will get an absolute ton, which some people will find ultra satisfying.
Yeah.
But yes, we are trying to not. Obviously, it shouldn't be that you're just getting 50 pages of items, but. You'll get some amount, and ideally the quality of the items get better as you send more, as opposed to just the quantity.
I saw a question in chat as well. The wages, how does that work with when's that getting paid? Do you get overdrafted account fees? What are we dealing with here?
So you have to take so you've got your personal gold, and then there's a treasury, and you want to put the gold into the treasury, and the wages only take from the treasury. And the reason for that is so that you're not just randomly losing your gold, that you're okay, I'm going to get to 60,000 so I can buy these items. All of a sudden it's just draining it, and you can't figure out. So your wages are paid from the treasury. You can do this via Johan or via the village map. There's just you hit add, drag, set an amount, it goes there. And yeah, they are just continuously drained from that. So it's not like it doesn't really come in chunks. It's like continuously going.
And do they unionize if you don't put enough money in there, or?
Not in Rayclast, no.
No worker protection in Rayclast.
All of a sudden, you might find you're collaborating with those pirates and with those bandits, and like arranging. You're arranging them to come in and kidnap people more often, and you had that abandon option we saw because those workers were
nice.
No, they don't. It's all very much a. We're all achieving the same goal, I guess, on the same team, but they just want their money. That's fine.
Yes, the children yearn for the mines. So I cracked up when I saw the map running teams auto simulating map thing.
Yeah.
So do they actually simulate running the map? Do they like actually run the map for you and get the things out of it you would get out of it?
We've tried very hard to make it feel like the case. However, of course, like, you don't simulate actually every single monster dying. It's too much expensive, right?
Extrapolated
but
simulation.
you effectively take here's what you'd have, and then you have, I mean, here's the question: do you trust the workers to pick up the right items? Because like, what if it's like you like get back your items and you're like, damn it, I know you left a mage blood on the ground. I just know you did. But yeah, anyway, you're not going to think about that, obviously. I mean, you can if you want, but yes, you do get it back. So if you send them to, I can't remember which maps. We've shuffled all the div cards around, so I'm not sure which maps drop what.
Now we can too.
Whatever one drops Mage Blood, if you put that base type in, the Mage Blood card, you will get that card out. That is the way to get that. Of course, generally people like running that themselves. So. And
you're telling me that like if it's a Hydra map, they'll bring a Hydra fragment back for you?
Yep. If you put in a Hydra map and they clear it successfully, it's worth noting they have a percentage amount of clear. And you can get that as high as you possibly can, but sometimes they get through like 50% of it and die because you put the map in as too hard.
Yeah,
You'll get 50%
are they
of the
burning
items.
6 portals halfway through a Hydra map?
Yeah. Some of if you're not sending elite people, they're kind of bad.
There's different quality of map runners, just as there is in Path of Exile players.
I mean, if you're sending your miners into the mapping, they don't know what to do. They're just like, I've tried mining the monsters and I failed
on the first pack.
Yeah. But yeah, they'll bring that back. You chuck in a map with 5 delirium orbs, they'll probably all die. But if they don't, they'll bring you back some splinters and some delirium rewards.
So what's like the most sketch, like juiced up map that they can run here if you get the best of the best?
I mean, the same as the player, right? A fully a prop corrupted T17 with, whatever else is bloody on it. I mean, or 16. Right. I mean, they might get. Sometimes you actually it's not mistake proof. You can put it in, and it can be like they have a 1% chance of 1% of the map will be cleared.
Good luck, guys.
And you put it in, and you see the timer count down like 2 seconds, and then they fail, and you're like, oh, they just died.
Portals gone in 2 seconds.
They just died to the first monster.
Yeah, that's almost as bad as me.
So yeah, you don't want to do that. But I mean, you technically can. You can just send them to die. Now they don't. In that case, they don't actually permanently die. That can happen. And you actually can lose the worker.
Wow.
There is a sync on that, so you are constantly trying to find more, but it doesn't happen that often. Excellent. And again, it is mostly avoidable by playing a little bit more safe instead of just sending them to their demise all the time.
This whole thing blows my mind. I just love the idea that we can just have like a bunch of plebs now to farm our fragments for it, so we can focus on bossing, like kings, while they do the peasant work in fields. Crazy. How did you resist the temptation to not go super hard on this and let us gear them and make parties and change their loot filters?
Well, early on there was all sorts of stuff like that we were talking about. It was like we were going full mercenary system with all sorts of stuff for a while, but it was too much and it was too complicated. So we decided not to. The whole auto running maps thing was certainly something we were very keen on very early in the league.
This massive expansion. Yeah. This is actually the downscoped version.
I'm getting that sense.
We certainly had mercenaries as in the first concept, and it was like you can send your mercenaries either on the ships or to the maps, and you can gear them up, and you can give them skills, and they have specializations. It's like
it was just too much though. It was too much management, too much not good.
So different, so much going on.
Different league's problem now.
But yeah, that does kind of sound like another league that I want. Though,
对啊，可以作为以后赛季的点子。
Exile thing.
Right.
Exile team manager, kind of like a sports manager. Yeah. Awesome. Maybe for the future.
Maybe.
Right. So yeah, that features list, like that video just kept going. Like you guys also showed rune smithing, which is like a new take on bench crafting, but as enchantments. These rune words, are they all known recipes, or is there some like discovery process there?
So you start with a few available. So there are different runes, different names. So there's like a sun rune, life rune, power rune. There's all these different names, and you start, I believe. You start with all the ones that require only sun runes, and then once you get a life rune, you can take it to Danig, and he's like, "Oh, now I can learn all of the things that require life rune."
And then he's so doing the hard work.
So I mean,
nice.
The Kalgurans are the ones who know how to do it. You're just bringing them the resources for it. So you eventually work your way up to the very most powerful ones, and you get things like what you saw there. There was the Fire Mjolnir, which you can put on one-hand or two-hand axe. What we've done is with a lot of the basic outcomes, you can apply that to any weapon, but with a lot of the very specialized ones, you can only apply it to one type of class. So the idea there isn't that like every build is just now doing the Doomfletch Prism on any weapon, the one that we saw on the live stream. It's like, no, that specifically goes on two-handed maces. And then I think the Fire Mjolnir one that was there goes on, I think it's one-handed axes. And, each thing goes on specifically one weapon. And what it allows you to do is so we've taken like an interesting bow unique mechanic, and now you can put it on like some dagger or something like that.
New builds, cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they get pretty powerful as far as like, I think there's one that is like, 100% reduced duration of like soul gain prevention for socketed gems on daggers, and like there's freaking every 20 seconds or something you get.
那个减少主灵时间，然后再加埋盾的话，那不是直接乱犯那个瓦尔刀阵了，好爽啊，听起来。然后匕首的话，匕首跟符文匕首应该是通用的，我就可以用符文匕首来做法术。我操
！Haunted by a different torment spirit, and I think there's like a rotating shrine buff one, so it's like every X seconds you're getting a new shrine buff on you, and not a lesser shrine, by the way, and sometimes including divine shrine as well. So you just be like, I'm just going to sit here until I'm immortal, and then I'll do the boss.
17 mapping strategy.
But those all require the highest tier rune, which we expect to be very, very expensive.
So are these something that you can trade, the runes, between players?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
100%, yeah.
Yes, they all come, primarily all come from shipping, which you can do pretty early in the game, but I suspect late game. And then they are considered a like additional bonus from shipping, where it's like if you trade to the Kalgurans, they'll send you that back, and the more you send them, the more runes they'll send you, because they're like, thanks for doing business with us.
Yeah, do you know what they're sending you back when you send them a shipment, or is it kind of just like...
No, we've intentionally been quite vague with that, just so people can figure it out. Now, it isn't... there's some determinism, and then some that's just influenced. So, like, I can say, for example, generally crops are giving you back currency, and there's some general influence, but we want people to figure that out and experiment and make up their mind as to what they think is the best combinations to send
certain
to different
locations,
ports.
certain resources are going to give certain rewards back that players can learn.
And there are bonuses on the port, so like you I think in the numbers there it's set 100, so at any given time it's like they'll pay double for wheat, or and then once you fill that order,
cool.
So after you've sent 10,000 wheat, they might be like, all right, now we're going to pay triple for the next 500 Verisium you send us, and stuff like that. So you are changing your shipments to different ports based on those bonuses. And then, like for example, the item for disenchanting, just a random slight pivot here, but the item you get from disenchanting, the thaumaturgic dust, that is a multiplier on your shipment value. So whatever you send, you then send dust. So if you send some amount of dust, it'll just double your shipment value. And so that one, so it's almost like a meta reward mechanic in that regard.
That's from grinding up your gear in the gear grinder thing. That's from also another feature that was in there.
And yep, you get a lot more dust for destroy. So just to add some value to some 1 Chaos T0 uniques, disenchant them, because they will give you the most. They will give you the most.
So
dust.
rarity is the key there. So
generally it's like better items give you more. So 6 mods, higher tier modifiers.
来看一下那个暗金的那个列表，PoE Wiki， 有一个暗金列表的，就是。如果你不知道的话，这个游戏的这个暗金是分稀有度的啊。然后 哎呀，这怎么卡住了？等我一下，我把没开录，就是这边有一个 wiki 的条目啊，这个叫做暗金物品的这个 TJ 的研究啊，这是一个攻略条目，我一般找不到，你得点进去这个暗金的这个主条目才找得到。那这里边就能从这个它这个分阶，比如说是 T0 级的暗金是最稀有的，比如说法许啊，像耳击锤啊，还有这个那个米兰斧啊，都是属于这一档的。所以就可以看这种就是超级便宜的超级稀有的这个 T0 暗金，然后又比较便宜的，就可以拆来分解获得大量的粉尘。它这意思就是这个样子。那感觉像这个这个的话是像这几个都没什么用啊。它这个我记得应该是限定掉落吧，好像是可以直接也是没什么用，都可以拆。它是一个 T1 的暗金，然后的话，这边看起来好多选项啊，这个肯定是不拆了，但是这一些都是没有人用的。找不到一个什么特别好的例子，就是说没什么用，然后它又比较稀有的那种情况。这个可以有待研究啊，大家可以慢慢去翻这个条目，感觉应该能找出来很多就是没什么人用，很便宜，然后你可以把它拆了卖很多粉尘这样子。蜘蛛刀这种肯定还是有人用的，这一把我记得也是还蛮贵的，因为能够和什么东西厨刀好像也是，厨刀好像它挺没用的，对，厨刀好像价格会降下来，所以就有这样的一个漏子可以去捡。对，这几个爪子，这两个偷取爪子也是没什么人用的，也是可以去拿来拆。哇，好一看，其实好多选项都是，其实你完全可以拿来拆的。像这个魔爆弓现在自赛季有用，但狮眼弓的话后边没什么用。狮眼弓后边产量比较低，但是没人用。前期开光还是有用的。对，好多这种选项啊。那行，回到现场。
You guys like adding sneaky new item sinks, don't you? Yeah. Trying to get those 1C items to 2C.
For sure. I mean, it turns garbage items into good items is the idea, or into more tickets at good items. Well, yeah, but the point.
是这样子的，分身弓召唤物好像就不是远射。
The dust is the ticket at better items, you know? Yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome. So another thing, recombination returns from Sentinel. It was mentioned that it's not going to be as strong as it was. It was obviously one of the strongest crafting mechanics we had outside of maybe Necropolis and that. In what ways is it weaker now?
There's two things that have mostly changed about it. One is, and not that I can even specifically remember exactly how it all worked, but there was all this like chance to mutate stuff that was going on with it. That's all gone. It just it combines the items and that's what it does.
The items together. So is there like the unique extra mechanic like modifiers that can randomly appear? Is that gone?
No, those are gone.
All right.
And so it is just merged two items together. The other thing that I like about doing it this way, as opposed to having it gated behind a currency item, is that you can actually engage with it earlier in the game. Now, I know that's going to be pretty unorthodox for most existing players, but it's still something you can choose to now engage with because the gold cost is based on the item level of the item input, and so you can have it be very, very cheap early and more expensive later. And so it just opens it up to more players instead of just being this thing that you're only ever going to use on the best of the best of the best.
Fun, yeah, that's good. I like that scalability that you can use it early.
Cool. Or even like early maps, you know, it's not going to feel super punishing, and like you can do things like that if you want to, of course.
Well, it's a good mechanic for that, but something that wasn't really accessible.
Yes.
那双加一是50级就出是吧？这也是有点意思的啊。对，这我看弹幕说3加1法杖，双加1法杖。那双加1最低出的等级是50级，也就是说50级物等的话，你就能够找到这样的一个法杖，然后就可以试着去和双加1了。因为那个普通等级是1级嘛，是5，对，试一下是1级还是5级啊？好像是2级，对，2级开始出，就你进那个进誓言手腕就能买到这个加1这种主动等级的嘛，然后再加上法术加1 50级，50级的成本应该不是很高，那你就可以在超级低级的情况下去奔这个双加1了。我操，好牛逼啊！
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, and I know Sentinel was added. They don't drop recombinators now because it's done through this mean. So
肯定是附魔啊。按合成器，它如果其他东西都不改的话，肯定是两边工艺一样的附魔，然后尽量出差不多的词缀，这样子是去两条词两条词这样去合的话是最好的。
Yeah, despite Sentinel being
just
there.
改造富豪也有说法。
randomly find an extra in maps to get more loot and
Just
have a
more
spicy
juicing, yep.
gameplay. Yeah, and you've done a bit of that too. So in addition to the new campaign stuff, making the campaign more interesting just with these random little encounters, you've got more stuff just appearing in maps as well. So Wildwood and Sentinel as well.
Yep, why not?
Yeah, why not, eh?
More juice.
Love it.
It's fun. I like the idea of just the random encounters. Like, they're not on the Atlas tree right now. That doesn't mean they never will be. But I like the fact that there's a handful of things that are just randomly spawning, and so you're doing your rotation, and that throws a little bit of a spanner in the works, and only in a positive element, right? It's not like it takes anything away.
Especially for things like that are effectively just, this will give you more loot and currency and stuff. So like Wildwood and Sentinel, they're just about like giving you a big boost to magic find. So you might not necessarily want those to be something that players can have active all of the time, but rather as like a cool bonus that randomly appears to make your map spicy.
That is the other benefit, because it is random and not something that you can just have guaranteed.
It's not what you play.
They can be stronger.
Yeah.
They can be more impactful as a result. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, they have to match the exact power of every other league or thing you can invest into onto the Atlas tree.
Cool. So there was the mention of those like 3 bosses that can disrupt your shipping and all that sort of stuff. When they take something hostage, is just talking about like this gameplay. What is that gameplay like? Are you going into like random fights, or is it always a boss fight that you're going into when you?
It's always a boss fight. Yep. Your Atlas runners will always be taken by the Bandit Lord. Your shipment will always be commandeered by the Admiral, whatever his name is, I forgot. Internal name by Pirate Boss. They get named and I don't remember them all the time. And then the one you find in the world is always the same one as well. And then you pretty much just go, it'll notify you, and then you go back to the town, to King's March, and the NPC will just be like, here's a portal, go there, kill this person, or don't. If you don't want to. If you feel like you're going to fail, you shouldn't go and do it, right? And you can bring your party members, but you can only enter it once. Like, once you die, you cannot re-enter. So,
又立好救场吧，可以组队，但是只有一次机会，那不就是立好救场
？One shot only.
Okay, let's take a little bit of a turn now, looking backwards at Necropolis and reflecting on some of the changes that happened in it. First, the overall endgame overhaul, such as the removal of sextants and the massive Scarab rework. How do you just feel about that overall, both of you first? How that went, the endgame overhaul?
I do think overall good, but it's very easy for that to get, looked at from a perspective of a few things that are bad and then looking at it badly. Like, there are certainly some things that were imperfect, and we are making some measures to change that. But I do think overall the shake-up was pretty healthy. And when I talk about the bad things, I'm talking like the T17 maps being too hard, right? Yep. And that kind of it overshadows a lot of what's good about it, because there's these few things that aren't right. And then I'm also talking like, okay, we removed Wandering Path, great, and then we added Back to Basics, which is also gone now, by the way, just to clarify, which wasn't mentioned there. Like, Back to Basics was even more unhealthy than Wandering Path, or equally unhealthy, depending.
你还别说，我今天上我酋长号爽了一下，那个酋长搭起来之后还没刷过图，然后去爽了一张那个返璞归真 T17。哇，真的满屏幕甲虫在掉，好爽好爽好爽！但是这种情况实在太毒瘤了，你不刷这种东西的话，你就没收益。
But both of them not good, not achieving the philosophy we want. So we didn't, because of that, and because Back to Basics became the meta, it ended up like not even evolving that much. And so I'm hoping with this now set of changes, but all of that ultimately comes about with, because what's going to happen is when you are releasing content on this scale, and I am certainly a risk taker, I like to push the boundaries and all that, you are going to have these things happen, it is borderline impossible for us to test everything, and that's where you see a lot of the reactionary patches that we did early in the league to try and fix and improve everything.
That definitely was something that was really hard, just for the team as well, and like it's also very hard just decision making about, is this something that should be fixed or is it not? It was pretty rough at the start there, and I think that is something we're trying to improve this time around by looking more at the extremes and like really zeroing in. So there's definitely a mandate to QA now of like, okay, we need to really work out like what is the actual maximum possible thing for this, and like, you know, like what is the difficulty of what that results in, like is it okay, like is the difficulty versus reward correct for what the players can do here, this kind of thing. And it's something obviously that we should have been like thinking more about before, and like it's something, you know, that we're really making sure this time we'll try and do better. But it's tough because like even thinking about what the most extreme case is can be really hard. Like so many things took us by surprise in terms of like particular combinations of things. Like there's so many just ways to combine stuff, and like from so much content from the past as well, that like it's like, yeah, it's hard to find. Like the fact that there were people finding new ways to abuse stuff even weeks after the it came out just sort of shows you that like, yeah, there's just it was kind of nuts.
Yeah, you guys asked me an interesting question yesterday when I first came in. It was like, how does 150 uniques from a single boss sound to you? I'm like, what the? That sounds crazy. What are you talking about?
So I guess we'll talk about some of the things that were happening that people weren't aware of. So there's there was a Reddit thread, and so I can't remember how far into the league, that was pretty much like, what the heck has happened to the prices of T0 uniques?
Yep.
And you had like Defiance of Destiny at like 4C. It was like actual craziness. And upon looking at this, and oh no, none of this was anyone abusing or exploiting anything.
Not a bug or anything, yeah.
In fact, I think, did we tell you the value of how many unique items were dropping in some of these?
I told him.
I was going to ask you to guess, but we were getting over 100,000 unique items in some instances, and I'm not even talking in a single map. And I'm not talking a 6-man group. I'm talking solo players who are able to achieve this, and this is where a lot of those things, so for example, the Shaper Touched rarity, there were just so many layers of multipliers that if used correctly altogether, but you ended up with less than 100 people on the entire realm acquiring over 99% of all T0 uniques. And so we have gone and looked at all that and been like, okay, with this, that is highly compromising the economy and the integrity of the economy, and we fixed some of this last league, but we are doing more of it this time to make sure that your average and above average player isn't like having the economy ruined as their experience, but we're just really, really controlling that like high top end. And I'm talking like most people would never have known this was happening. They would have just been like, where are all these uniques coming from?
It's not a bug. It's just the math of
it's just
correct,
exactly.
Quantity.
There's technically legal stuff, and like there's always a question with stuff like that, because generally speaking, we have the policy of no mid-act nerfs, and yet there were certain cases, and that was really tough the last league, just because we did do some changes to certain mechanics, which we wouldn't normally do because it was just so ridiculous. Like there was stuff going on there that just was not okay.
I saw a screenshot of like one of the monsters that would be part of this, and it was like, it had a list of modifiers that was the entire screen.
We were talking yesterday about whether or not we need a way to collapse the display of the number of essences underneath something's life bar, and it's like, where are we at? Which, by the way, it's still there, so it's like, a thing that you can still do. But yeah, and I'm not talking like we're getting rid of all the uniques. Like that's what I'm saying. I'm asking you, is 150 all right? And you're like, that sounds excessive. And I'm like, well, it's like several hundred times less than what it was, but it's still top off screen, bottom off screen of unique items just everywhere. And that's just like a single monster. You get the whole res in the area. So we want it to be extreme. Like, don't get me wrong, but it shouldn't be that the entire economy is ruined by 100 people who aren't, or a few people even who aren't even abusing anything or exploiting anything or doing anything illegitimate. Like, and the problem is, that's where we got into that state where it was like, all right, do we have to nerf all X, A, B, C, and D as we kind of discovering and figuring out these strategies? And it's like, let alone the fact that this stuff absolutely rams the performance of the instances, right? Like, I don't know if people saw it when those meat sacks were dying, and you'd get like 6-second lag spikes while it's generating the unique items, and So yeah, anyway, a lot of it's much more controlled now. We've actually assessed exactly where all that was coming from. We've taken a lot of caution to not nerf the average above average even further than that.
A normal player should not see any change.
Yeah.
I mean, and I loved how gloves off it's feeling with your ridiculous changes to the end game here. Like, it feels like you've really opened up over this past couple of leagues to
100%
change stuff pretty wildly.
Again, I go back to that. Go back to that philosophy of like, if we can do stuff to make things better, we do it. And it's just the unfortunate reality is that, and I'm ultimately the one pushing most people to do this for PoE 1, and the unfortunate reality is it comes with risks, and as a result, failures, of which are 100% on me, like without question. And that's why, again, like straight after the patches, it's like full hands on deck trying to make sure everything is as good as possible. And then we get into a little bit of that difficulty of thinking some people want the game to stay as it is, regardless of the state, and a lot of people want it to keep changing. And we get into this kind of like, which side of this fence do we fall on? And we have to really evaluate each change and do it. But look, ideally, the changes wouldn't be necessary. But when you're changing this much, doing patches this massive, this quickly, some of it is inevitable. I would hate to, I personally, and you could convince me, you could tell me I'm wrong about this, you might be able to convince me. I would prefer that we do everything possible with the time allocated, as opposed to like play it safe, do something, a small patch and give it there, and yeah, sure, it's safe, less will go wrong, but at the end of the day, there's way less to do, way less fun, way less changes, less to learn and evolve with, and it just feels like, I suspect at the end of the day it'll be way more boring, even though it might be more safe. Yeah. So again, it's possible that I'm gone too far one direction, and we have pulled back a little bit here on some of that safety. But like, I never want to get to the point where we're releasing something flat and stale just because it's safe. I want to always be making sure that we're doing everything to make things as fun and exciting and the best as possible for everyone, including myself, when I play the game.
Well, these updates have felt way more energetic. I think it's refreshing, I think, for a lot of us who've been playing for 10 years at this point.
Right.
It's pretty cool stuff. So on the tier 17 maps, they were intended to be like a gateway to Uber bosses, but they ended up being harder and more restrictive than that actual content. And we had Uber boss viable builds, really struggling with that actual content. So how are you kind of changing things with that, or are you happy with it, where that's at?
I mean, the ultimate numerical change to T17 monsters is that they have it's approximately 55% less life, so they have less than half the life they had before and 30% less damage, which seems extreme. And I will just note that was like actually not intended.
Yeah, an interesting story about that.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that two different designers did the life change to T17 without realizing the other person had already done it.
That's so funny.
So that was kind of like an unintended side effect. But it's like when you come down to, well, so why the hell are these monsters so damn tough? And then we're like, oh crap, there were two people who made this change independent of each other.
We have counted that on the bosses to some degree, so they are not just like an absolute joke now. But yeah, just the monsters themselves, which it did compound with back to basics and the mod scaling, like the thing. Once you have like 400% increased area of effect on the monsters, it's kind of like, okay, this is like getting a little, on the bosses I should say, it's like this is getting a little bit out of hand. Like, how can I dodge this mechanic that is larger than the arena? You could argue they're signing themselves up for it, but then it's like you want that for the rest of the map, which then means the bosses are pretty much like impossible. Strong word to use because everything's always possible with enough, build ruckus going on. But anyway, it wasn't right. Like, these things weren't right. So hopefully with back to basics removed and the changes to T17s, implicitly it should be more approachable to more players, less you have to play like a subset of 10, 12 builds in order to achieve them. Like, it should be way more open. Obviously with all the melee builds as well, that should be a hell of a lot more viable this time. So I would expect a lot more players to be enjoying those, as opposed to because again, we're solving the item quantity thing where it's like we want to open up more builds and make you feel less like you have to play certain things. So then T17's being that hard resulted in the exact same thing. These are not intentional things. When you get to Uber Pinnacle, it's all right for the number of builds to reduce drastically, because it's like you want to be a boss killer at that point, or that's fine. But when we're just talking about like the top tier of maps, it's not okay to have it be so constrained there. So just mistakes were made, honestly, and they hopefully are now fixed.
Yeah. So the main design of the modifiers on these maps is these build bricking modifiers, ones that are just basically not doable for certain builds or thereabouts. Why is this the method that you went with for these modifiers?
I personally just think it is important that you actually are investing in rolling your map and finding the maps that you can do, or choosing how you can overcome the modifiers. And I know that's probably not a popular opinion. I very much understand that a lot of people are just like, I can go, and that's all I want to do. But I think especially with the upper tier like that and the extra layer of rewards that they're giving, I think you should have to invest more currency into it and more thought into it, or be like, oh, this is a real good map. It's got like some specific reward modifiers you want, but there's this one bad thing I'm going to have to deal with, and then you actually do commit to dealing with it. It again hopefully adds more ebbs and flows to the process, as opposed to it again just being like out go and run, and that can be quite where some people like that, and that's okay. You can still obviously do that with 16s. I do like these things having an impact on your build, just not to either one, it should be avoidable, or not to the extent it was before. And again, investing into them, rolling them, like it's certainly not something I'd want to stray away from. I actually consider it a success when you have to re-roll your maps. Again, probably a controversial take, but I think it is a much better thing getting an actual... Like, it feels more like an actual game mechanic, as opposed to like, well, at the point it's just alk and go, and alks are worth so little. Why you just drop them rare, and like, why are you even engaging with the currency on maps system?
Why have mods if the mods don't matter?
Do you take like some consideration to how many chaos, for example, you expect someone to put into a map to produce mods that are on average viable for their build that they're doing?
We do, yes. So I mean, not in the context of a build here, but like, for example, we were like, okay, if we want to make T17s able to be easier, like, should we reduce it back to 4 to 6 modifiers?
Yep.
But then you just, the argument, the reason why we never did that just this league is because, well, now it's even more chaos you have to invest to get 6 modifiers, because the right answer is probably to run 6 modifiers because it gives the best rewards. And so it's like, well, that's just going to massively increase the amount of chaos orbing someone has to do on those maps. So let's not do it that way. Let's find a different way to do it. So we're definitely considering how many you're having to. From a like hyper build specific, it's like, if I'm playing this exact specific build, how many chaos on average do I need to avoid it? No, not like hyper specific, but in terms of like broad mechanics, we do generally try and consider that.
Yeah, I imagine you'd be taking like a range of builds and saying, oh, on average, it's going to take about 10, 20 rerolls to produce a map you want to run on this character. But
my hope is that some people at least look at it and go, okay, if I just change this one thing, then I can still run it. You know, so it's not always just like, I know this is probably the preferred strategy. In fact, I'll do it myself probably most of the time. You just avoid anything that's going to cause any friction to your character. But like, there are probably a good chunk of players who are just like, I will deal with this bit of friction by either slowing down a little bit, or changing something, or subbing something out, or, you know, and it's good for those players to be able to do that, because then technically they're having to invest less currency. Whether or not it's worth the payoff, it's up to them really to decide that. But
you want the mods to matter, and I get that, and these certainly do matter, but how do you feel about it versus modifiers that do things like, say, this modifier adds these certain sorts of packs of monsters to the map that are very difficult, but also increasing the reward and making the map more interesting by making it more different, as opposed to something like, you know, your energy shield is turned off?
The problem you have with things that are implicitly adding direct rewards beyond certain other things is obviously the issue of the fact that you now feel like you have to roll for them. And you saw like this with the Shaper
is a maze.
And with the Shaper Touch modifier earlier this league, before it was changed, all of a sudden and now all of a sudden you're spending more currency on the maps than you were avoiding the builds, because now you are not only having to get a specific rewarding outcome, you're having to dodge the build things as well. And so it was even more. And as we've removed some mods this league, like I know the barrels was one of them, where people were going for the barrels, and it's a couple we've removed a few of those, like, you know, sink currency into this. I would actually expect the amount of chaos you're sinking into these is less this league, because we've removed those. But we have kept some, but like we've also then made them rarer, so you're like less likely, but then which I know you could say is counterintuitive to investing currency, because now you have to invest more if you have to get them. But there is a point beyond where you're now no longer expecting to get it, and thus you are just like okay getting it as a surprise, as opposed to when it's kind of within reach, you will just sink currency until it's there. But I actually do like the fact that, like, I liked the days back when you would roll for a lot of the maze and then you'd exalt the maps and stuff like that. That stuff was enjoyable. I found that quite enjoyable.
But it was kind of like the game is a bit different than how it used to be. But
for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're not obviously going in that path anymore. But there's still a little bit of it there. The mods still matter. Reward mods can be bad, but it's good to also have them. There's like a little bit of friction there, which is hard to get perfectly right. And then in the same sense, I mean, some of them are probably... There are some other small balance changes around T17s, like those bloody Revenant packs were out of control. All of a sudden the corpse is exploding that you can't even see. Like we did all of this like telegraphing improvements to Detonate Dead and then like missed Revenants.
Good stuff, yeah.
So all of a sudden now you're just dead to this invisible corpse explosion. And like
classic. There's
a few other fine-tuned balance around some of the T17 stuff to make it feel less terrible. And I think it's pretty good. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but I'm hoping that it's going to feel a lot better.
Should tier 17s be one of the most profitable things to farm?
I think yes. I mean, what is the argument for no?
I've just seen discussion.
I don't mean from you. I just mean in general.
Yeah, like some people are, concerned about whether that's the thing that should be happening or not.
Well, should T16s before that? And you could argue, well, okay, T17s you have to trade for. And that's the real difference, is that if you want to run them permanently, you have to trade for them. But generally the economy sorts itself out there to some degree. It's just that it adds that extra layer of annoyance. Yeah. But then also if T17s were self-sustaining, then it was kind of like what differentiates them from 16s at that point. It's just back to what you were doing with 16s, except they're now purple with harder modifiers. And you could argue that's better or worse, except I really like the idea of that, when you are just generally playing and not engaging with, the trade to that level, you're doing 16s with the occasional popping into 17s here and there. I do think that is generally better. But I can see why it can be annoying for someone who's like, I have to trade for these because I don't want to run anything but them. But that kind of can always be argued to be the case for almost everything. I mean,
in some ways, T17s are are the map scarcity that the map system used to have long ago at lower levels. It's like you've got this one tier that kind of has that sort of like you're not expected to necessarily, if you're just playing without trade, to be able to just run it again and again for T17 specifically. And that's kind of also comes down to that same thing with the mods. It's like the reason you're caring about re-rolling and so on for T17s is because of the fact that you don't necessarily have, they're not just growing on trees. That's why you've got a bit of a different philosophy there with the mods that they have on as well.
I know this stuff is like pretty it's going to be pretty polarizing between people as to what's right there, but like it is very important to us that the ebbs and flows remain and you don't just end up with this flat boring grind at the very top end like that. Like it should be evoking difficulty and it shouldn't just feel completely just it again, it gets further away from a game and more towards just a kind of AFKable / and I don't mean actually AFKable, but something where you're not really investing much emotion into and thought into, and it doesn't feel like you're playing at that point. It just feels like you're just going along with it. So I think it's very important to have the different spikes and things come and go, and to have friction and all of those things. And I think without any of that, you'd find stuff would get very boring very quickly.
Just very quickly, how do you feel about the betrayal changes, like the change to the Veiled Chaos and the simplification of it as well? It feels like now it's mostly people just kind of spamming Katarina with maybe some consideration to getting some like div card stacks or something like that, but you're not really doing as much of the engaging with the board now, I think.
Betrayal is in a very bad state, for sure. I am not happy with it. It was on the list of 325's thing. I know, despite the fact we have so much, there was more. We didn't get round to doing it. It's currently slated for 326. I'm very much hoping we can do it then. The main thing I want to divorce is... so I actually just want there to be... there is one safe house, and that... and so all four connect to one thing. oh, sorry, how do I explain this? It's like effectively Katarina isn't tied to the safe house. Like you can do your safe house and that will give you a ticket to Katarina. And so you just have one safe house that has the whole board on it, and you earn intelligence for it, and the people still have their reward association, and then doing that gives you a itemized version of Katarina you can run separately. But the main thing is you're not linking the board to Katarina's, because there's always been this friction of do I min-max my Katarina outputs, or do I, do my interesting board layout? And you're just at the point where it's like, screw all that, I just want as much mastermind intelligence as possible, so I'm not going to interact with anything on the board really, except for whatever might min-max that. And so, I want to divorce those two things so that you don't have that conflict, because we have never been able to get that balance, and I don't even know if that's possible. You're always either going to want to never run Katarina because it destroys your board state, or you'll always run Katarina because the Veiled Orb. And so I want to divorce those two things such that one doesn't destroy the other. Because it hasn't been right the whole time. So, and I think that will just be a much, much better if we do that. And then Katarina is just there as a thing you can do. You do the boss fight and you can trade for it. You can buy the tickets to it if you want. Or, and then you can do all the board interaction, separately. You'll still have I want to min-max my safe house running to get tickets to Katarina, but what we can do is have a correlation of the chance of getting it, or the number of the tickets you get to Katarina correlate to the state of the board somehow. But at least I don't ever want it to be like I'm not going to fight Katarina because I don't want to reset the board. I don't think those two frictions should ever occur. It hasn't been right, honestly, since we released it.
All right, so let's let him cook, hey? Let's let him cook. So we should talk just a little bit about Necropolis itself. I know you were pretty excited for the mechanic. I was too, because I love a good, thick crafting league. And it certainly ended up very powerful, but ultimately the crafting mechanic, not that popular, I think, due to the friction of engaging with it, the corpses, managing all of that. But how do you feel about Necropolis in hindsight now?
Definitely that part is, well, we kind of knew going in that it was more on the complicated side, for sure. Some things just kind of, it's not necessarily a problem for something to be a little bit more complicated like that, but it probably went a little bit too far. That being said, it was pretty damn powerful, especially after our changes we made very early into the league, in terms of getting full T1 modded items. Probably went a little bit too far, to be honest. But that being said, understood. It was a bit too computer sciencey, I like to call it, in terms of lots of figuring out what to do, and kind of uncertainty to the point where it overwhelmed a lot of people. And that's where you see, even recombinating and runesmithing coming back way more simple, straightforward. Some things are just very clean cut. Some things are a little bit more complicated, and different users appeal to both. Would I have changed it now knowing that? I mean, I would have had the balance initially go out correct at the start, but I would say there's still a place for things for it.
The update was certainly very solid for it, making it a lot better.
Simplified a bunch of stuff down with it as well. I'd probably have gone a bit further with the simplification if I'd had to redo it with some of it. Some of those meta mods and some of the more crazy things are a little bit,
For me, though, it wasn't about so much how much complicated it was. It was more about the just getting so many corpses. Trading for so many corpses, right?
Sure. Yes, fewer, more impactful ones would have been a lot better. Yeah, you ended up getting a lot. That's partly due to the Atlas Tree passives, which was a mistake. Straight up, goodbye, they're gone.
Yeah.
If it was to redo...
Experiment. Done.
Yep, 100% experiment. They're no longer there. Everyone saw that as an Atlas Tree tax.
Yeah.
Yep, it was. You could have argued making them way weaker would have mitigated that. Whatever.
Why?
The original intention of it was okay, we want these keystones because it allows people to change behavior. And I think if we are to see that again, we would have that. We'd have introduced ways for people to change the behavior, but not invest into the increases and more corpses and all of that, because it felt mandatory. And it often will when you have the league in every single area. And so, that was a pretty big contributor towards this problem.
It felt like the opposite of what we were talking about with Gold, where Gold allows you to turn user experience friction into gameplay friction. It was the opposite, where it was all user experience friction, because it was about trading with a ton of non-responding people for corpses.
Yep.
然后这种这个实体摆上去
per craft.
We also obviously made a lot of changes to that early as well in the league, but still it was like, I remember Ziz messaged me at one point and it's just like, oh my god, the amount of quad tabs I need to hold all these corpses, and I'm just like feeling real sad about it. It's not like, that was the intention by any means. So yeah, I didn't quite hit the mark for sure.
Just lessons learned.
Lessons learned for sure. Yeah.
All right. Cool. The All Flames had a bit more mixed positive and negative. Like, it was definitely a very cool added layer of map customization, but it was not optional, and that was definitely the concern we had going into it. And it also added just that extra layer of work that you have to do before you can start playing, which PoE has a fair bit of. And
for sure. And again, we with the league being like, something you do have to generally engage with before doing areas. It's again that kind of X factor that makes a league different and makes it feel different. But at the end of the day, probably was a little bit too much annoyance to have to do this thing every single area. But it's certainly we like to try these things out here and there. Some people probably thoroughly enjoyed engaging with that stuff, of course. And end of the day, leagues are never going to really be for everyone. They're always going to have some amount of people who aren't really into it. But look, we tried.
但是大家都不喜欢的赛季，肯定是真的是烂赛季。
Something new. We always do like to try something new when it comes to these leagues, and a lot of people did enjoy various elements of it. Some of it doesn't hit. That's all right. Like, we don't do it again, right? Like, that's part of it. And this is a lesson learned every single league, right? There are always elements of leagues that don't work. There are elements we learn from. There are elements we don't repeat. And then we often what we can do is take the stuff that is good, that is fun, and find a way to integrate it into the game later. And now the core game experience is overall better as a result of us, learning from all the stuff.
Yeah. Keep the experiments going. Keep going wild with it. We're going to go rapid fire now so people can get their 30,000 patch notes, their record setting patch notes very soon here. So we had finally the much-awaited massive melee changes. What was the big thing that led to you guys pulling the trigger on this issue?
Melee stuff. Ultimately, the community. People wanted it.
What was the key change that you kind of needed, maybe to get figured out?
The one that I remember us walking through was there was kind of we made a document of okay, what are the things that a melee build currently mandatorily needs to know to do in order to be viable, and effectively we had all these multipliers, and if you didn't know to do them, then you just sucked.
It's bad. Yeah.
And so effectively we needed to do something about that to make it so that just hit things is a more viable path. I think this is really looking at that, and so that hence why you have the removal of melee totems and so on. Honestly, even I was kind of shocked that Mark was like, let's just straight up remove them. I know we talked for a little bit about maybe there's some way to make it so that you don't, the builds that use them aren't the same as melee builds or something, but in the end it was just what, we'll go clean slate, and we'll try to make sure let's just get rid of any of these barriers, and I think that was probably the right choice.
I just want you to hit things with your weapon, or monsters or the ground with your weapon, and things die, and you're not having don't get me wrong. I want there to be secondary axes of skills that are often skill involved. You do have to use them. I don't just want it to be that you have 1 6-link and every single other gem slot is empty. It should be that there are these other axes, but I also want you to be able to choose whether or not which ones you use, which ones you invest into the tree. Whereas a lot of what was happening before is something is often either too powerful that you feel like you have to use it, and all of a sudden now every single build is using this exact same thing, and every single build feels so similar. Whereas really the way that should ideally work is something is much weaker initially, and you have to invest into the passive tree and stuff like that to make it good enough. But it means that different characters will have different secondary specializations, and you'll find a lot of these, something like tinctures, something like retaliation skills, they're going to be quite polarizing. People are going to love them or hate them. And that's okay, that's good. And it means that you get these differences in builds where you are actually speccing into and using these secondary things. But the one other main thing is I really want it to be less unique item-driven mandatory things, right? I don't want uniques to suck, don't get me wrong. I just want it to be that it's in order to do X, Y, and Z, I must be using this, and now I'm considered viable by the game's standards. You know,
like build checklist thing that we.
Yeah, it's gone a little bit too far, and so we're bringing a lot of these mechanics to the forefront on the passive tree, because that is one way place, and of course by having more. Like, considering when you've got this league, you're going to have runesmithing, you've got the obviously quality changes applies to unique, you've got the new modifiers on rare items, you've got like, we haven't buffed the life on every unique, we've buffed it on Kelms. That's it, right? So all uniques proportionally just got worse to rare items, quite intentionally, so that, you know, rare item, and it's not, you know, it's not just hiding behind all these things you got to learn and wiki and do all of that. So it should be that you can get further without having to have extreme specialized knowledge, especially with melee this time round. And on top of that, like, bringing a lot of these hidden mechanics that were like hard to figure out way more to the foreground, so they're just more obvious and you can figure them out. And also just, yes, hit things and they die, and not feel so like, okay, I'm hitting things and they're not dying, but now I do this thing and combine this and this and this and this and this, and now things get hit and die. That is still there, and that will allow you to go even further and even more efficiently, and thus get more items and more power, of course, right? We're not dumbing things down. The intention is just to make it that, like, if you aren't doing all of these things, you're not just absolute garbage, you know?
Well, playing devil's advocate a little bit, the new banners, is that kind of just melee totems again?
I mean, not in this... Okay, they're not as powerful implicitly. They are... It depends on what you want to call it. You can look at the totems from a perspective of, yes, the busy work side of things, of I'm having to do this thing every so often, sure. But it's also not like, if you don't use them, it's not like you're bad, right? You can get damage from so many places. Only one of the banners is giving damage. It's giving a lot less damage. In order to make banners really good, you have to spec into a lot of them onto the tree. They are still kind of good. I do expect a lot of melee characters still to be using them. And I do like the idea that there is... you know, skill involved as to thinking, when should I use them?
They're not an always up thing like the totems were, which is the biggest issue with them.
Unless you invest into them, in which case, so one of the passives that was shown is that banner effects linger for X seconds. They automatically pick up when you exit the radius, so you can place them down and then just sprint, and then you get the effects for seconds, and then you can place it again. And sure, yeah, it might end up being like on rotation, it's being used for some builds, and on others they're being way more tactical with it, doing it during a breach and during this, but on regular monster to monster clearing they're not. Kind of want it to be... I feel like you have a lot more agency with banners, and yeah. The other thing, of course, being getting rid of, even like Berserk. We're getting rid of a lot of the extreme high power mandatory things that if you were a player who didn't know about it, all of a sudden you're not, you know, considered viable. And the one other thing we've done there, I know we said rapid fire, but don't worry, it's part of the question.
People can wait.
We've made sure to we've got spreadsheets out the wazoo of like experience per hour testing. We've got like, you know, time testing. We've got like our one of the people probably see him takes ages, always on the ladder, freaking winning things here and there. He has been sitting there running, literally doing races, technically with every single class for the last 3 months, probably straight. Every single waking minute he is playing a different character, writing down times to kill Brutus, time to kill this, time to get to this, time to do this, XP per hours everywhere, what variables make the most difference. We've taken all of that data and gone and been like, all right, these are the outliers on the bottom, these are the outliers on the top, let's like find out where the thing should sit. And generally it's now meant to be, if you are a character with a melee character, and let's say you've got 70th percentile gear, and there's a caster next to you that has 70th percentile gear, if you can maintain... a melee character is generally meant to be stronger and more efficient at that point, of course, but it is easier to take damage and harder to maintain damage uptime as a result. So if you can overcome those two axes, a melee character with equivalent gear should be better than any other character.
In a better player's hands.
Yes, and then a better player can obviously seize that even better and take that even further.
That's fascinating. Wow. So we've got like new item bases going into much higher level maps and stuff like that as well. What kind of led to that change there? Just making rares matter again?
Making rares matter again is one thing, but also it's, again, adding that very obvious way to keep getting upgrades throughout endgame. honestly, given how long in-game takes and how much of an integral part of it is, like the amount of base types introduced there, like sure, we had steel rings and two-tone boots, but they didn't really make a huge difference.
Yep.
So we're just adding more here. It is more clear. Like if you are struggling in yellow maps, you have something you can try and get now to make that easier for yourself. If you're struggling in red maps, you have these obvious things that are like, this will be an upgrade for me. Let me actually try and do it. Obviously just on the defensive axis for now, so you can maybe focus a little bit more of your passives into damage, along with all the new defensive tools. But yes, primarily it is like, you know, a more obvious, here's a way that you can upgrade your character. And of course for high-end players, it's a new thing to strive for, to push their character further than ever before. I wouldn't say this specific direct goal is like get rid of unique items. That is just a happy side effect of, you know, rare items mattering more once again.
All right. We'll wrap up pretty much there. We've got lots of new leagues coming back this time. Is there any other ones you're looking forward to? I know people have been asking about the Trial of the Ancients as well, whether that sort of stuff's coming back.
Trial of the Ancestors, probably not. Maybe for I don't know. You never know with these things. If you had asked me Sentinel, I would have said no.
Yeah.
And now it is. So you never know with these things, honestly. I'd say there's no current plans, but things change every week around here.
Guys, this was a massive Q&A. I'm exhausted. It's awesome. Let's go take a break and let people read some patch notes. And there'll be an FAQ news post wrapping up some of the questions from this, but also ones that we didn't get a chance to get around to. So you guys will be able to answer some of them there and read some of those later. But thanks so much, Jonathan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And good luck to everyone reading those patch notes.
Yeah, good luck.
大家给小象点点3连啊！
We considered doing audiobook versions of them in the past, but I'm not going to be sitting there. I would have to be reading that.
Pick your favorite streamer. Remind them to drink lots of water and enjoy, folks. But that's it for now. I'm Ziggy. Thanks for watching, folks. See you later.